Hello from a very sunny Saturday here in Japan. Today we will continue this series talking about some common misconceptions I see in the overseas Visual Kei fandom, not to cruelly criticize, but simply to educate. Again, this is going through the filter of someone who is an active Visual Kei musician and someone who is originally from America, but hasn't been back in the Western world for on my, 13th year now. As today is a very nice Saturday, I'm a bit lazy, so I'm using one of my old 80s Japanese mics I use for its grit and nastiness. So there is a little hum to this baby. I do not have TikTok. I've never installed it. I thought about using it once and uploaded like two things from my browser in the past for Zavok, but one of the things I hear people say from that whole TikTok era bubble is that Visual Kei is political. So today we're going to be talking about things like confirmation bias and horseshoe theory. Let's start with horseshoe theory. Horseshoe theory argues that the extreme left and extreme right, rather than being at opposite and distinct ends of a linear political spectrum, actually bend around and closely resemble one another. Much like the ends of a horseshoe, the trap occurs when you become so thoroughly disgusted by the behavior of one extreme that you reactively align yourself with the other, only to find you have adopted the exact same authoritarian mechanics with a different coat of paint. Whether an ideology claims to be fighting for a traditional order or social equity, the ends of the horseshoe share identical dangerous characteristics: authoritarianism, collectivism over individualism, purity culture, justification of violence, harassment. Both sides of these extremes basically do the same shit, just with a different coat of paint on it. Now, onto confirmation bias. To understand how someone can look at Visual Kei, a historically theatrical, emotion driven, and highly aesthetic genre in a conservative country, and conclude that it is a political movement aligned with modern Western progressive ideologies, you have to look at the mechanics of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias isn't just making a mistake, it is an active, albeit unconscious, filtering of reality. It is the psychological tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre existing beliefs, while aggressively ignoring or rationalizing away anything that contradicts them. Now, we see this cultural projection in the anime fandom also. The foundation of this specific bias relies on projecting an entirely foreign political framework onto Japanese art. Modern Western political discourse is highly polarized. And for many heavily politicalized individuals, everything is viewed through the lens of their specific political ideology, right? When they look at a Japanese subculture, they aren't looking at it within the context of Japanese society. They've never been here, they don't live in it, or maybe they do live here, but they're just like an English teacher, not knocking the job, but you're in a bubble, right? We all are to some extent, right? They are scanning it for familiar Western political markers. If a band challenges gender norms through androgyny and makeup, a Western observer steeped in modern politics immediately flags this as a progressive political statement. They ignore the fact that in Visual Kei, androgyny is an established theatrical tradition and an aesthetic rebellion against the rigid, suited up salaryman conformity of Japanese society, not a manifesto on modern Western gender politics. And it also has a background of hundreds of years of androgyny in Japanese art itself that has nothing to do with the kind of society things I mentioned. Now, to anyone who just thought, oh, but you mentioned it's a social rebellion, that's political. This is the cornerstone of this fallacy. It is incredibly common to hear people forcefully claim that rock, I guess goth is more common, right, was inherently a political movement. While those genres certainly brushed up against political themes, conflating a cultural and artistic rebellion with a literal political movement or ideology strips the music of its primary purpose: individual expression. A social artistic movement, whether it's the birth of rock and roll, the explosion of punk, or the rise of highly aesthetic, theatrical, underground genres exist to disrupt cultural and elevate personal expression. Absolute individuality, true artistic movements are inherently anti-crowd, hive mind. They are built by individuals carving out their own unique universes. Even when a scene forms, the core mechanism is personal catharsis, right? It's about building a sanctuary for yourself through your craft, completely independent of what the masses are doing or saying is the norm. So, for confirmation bias to work, the observer must aggressively hunt for the exceptions and treat them as the rule. If you want to prove Visual Kei or Goth, for example, is a left wing political movement, like I guess this is the tinge people put to this, you have to comb through decades of history, thousands of bands, and tens of thousands of songs about vampires and shit, tragic romance, despair, psychological horror, or, just being crazy motherfucker, abstract beauty, all those things, just to find a handful of lyrics or music videos with an anti-war or anti-establishment message. Once they find those 2 or 3 examples, the bias locks in. See, the proof is right here. They completely disregard the base rate, the fact that 99% of the scene is utterly devoid of modern political messaging or even past political messaging. A few isolated examples do not define an entire musical landscape. But to the biased mind, those few examples are all that exist, or rather, all that they need to fall into confirmation bias. That said, the majority are non-political, apolitical. I don't use English much often, so sometimes I forget words. Okay, so that said, a person suffering from confirmation bias who wants to see the scene as aligned with their modern left-wing politics has to perform severe mental gymnastics here. Think of all the bands that you could also use as confirmation bias to say that they're Nazis or that they love Imperial Japan. There's more bands with this imagery. This imagery shatters their theory. They have to either completely ignore it, pretend the darker, edgier history of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s underground scene simply doesn't exist, reframe it as satire, convince themselves that when a band utilizes Imperial Japanese aesthetics, they are doing so to critique or deconstruct right-wing politics, rather than using it because it looks cool, or like lots of Japanese here, they're pretty openly, supporters of that. They are proud of the era, even if they lost. I've heard these things so many times firsthand. Think of how many times the overseas Visual Kei fandom has gotten upset at an older Visual Kei bandman for saying positive things about Trump, etc. I'm not a fan of him or Kamala. You need to see the South Park episode about choosing between a turd and a giant douche, right? A turd sandwich and a giant douche. That's basically my position. Neither of them you can trust. But think of all the instances of Japanese promoting what you guys, I guess, on the far left would call far right, liking the current prime minister of Japan, liking Abe, liking Trump. So you would have more examples if you wanted to have a confirmation bias that they're Nazis, I guess, if you extremists would want to use such an extreme term, right? So yeah, it's apolitical. Lots of Japanese, if you live here, they don't really pay attention to politics. They don't really care. People are generally central, right-leaning on things of management and government, left-leaning on private things of your personal life. I mean, everyone is touched by imperfection, but you should always aim to be centered so you don't get pulled into that horseshoe theory I talked about. I guess because I'm older and I didn't live in America during this whole extreme division era, I guess you would say. But yeah, because I love music history, it's so weird to me because so many punk and goth artists who are at the forefront of the genre were about individualism, and they go against these modern talking points like, how can you be like right-leaning on certain matters and still be punk or goth when people like Johnny Ramone, John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, the singer for X, right? Cervenka. So many of these like goth people too. Ian Curtis, Peter Still. Morrissey is kind of a cunt. I mean, who likes him? Wayne Hussey from The Mission, Sisters of Mercy. Before that, like All these guys were like anti super left wing politics of UK era or anti communism or just straight up right wing. So it's really weird to me that there's this whole like ideology of you can't be this when those genres are about individualism. It's so weird to me. I mean, in your life, you should always aim to broaden your ideals. Nothing's going to be black and white, and there's lots of gray. But yeah, to keep on the main subject, is Visual Kei a political movement? No, no, it's not political. It's mostly apolitical. But if you want to have some weird confirmation bias to feel like some 50-year-old Japanese man has the mindset of a teenage TikToker and their political ideology, I guess go for it, bro, if that makes you happy. But objectively, it's not true. And going against social norms, if you want to go through the lens of everything is political, you're probably extremist already, and this will be like talking to a Mormon or a Scientologist, I guess. You're so brainwashed. But yeah, lots of those guys who are against social norms, like I said, you've found them to have right-wing sympathies or ideals. And so which is it? It's neither. It's down the center. Don't be an extremist cunt. Like, speaking of things like goth or like that, just watch the show Daria. She shits on the people who have like the right conservative like viewpoints, and then she makes fun of her friends who are classmates also who have far left or hippie like bullshit far left ideals. That's more punk or goth to me. You're in the middle, pissing off both sides. The most punk rock and roll thing would be to not care if you're part of a group, not care about whether people call you this or that. Just know yourself in your heart. And yeah, the left or the right, they're both going to be stupid cunts. Just try to find something good down the center. And don't project everything, all those weird political or like your inner what's the word in English? Your inner turmoils onto everything around you or everyone around you. If you disagree with someone, you know, you don't have to hate them, and you don't have to, even if you disagree with me on this subject, like, cool, tell me what you think. I mean, this is all just firsthand experience to me. I doubt I'll be swayed, but I am open to listen to what you have to say, and I'm open to conversation and difference of ideals. The main goal, I hope, is that you learn something from this and you maybe reconsider some ideals that you had or some ideals that were fed to you. The main goal in life is to increase those wrinkles in the brain and not be a stupid cunt. I hope you guys have a good day. Peace out.